What's happening, guys? Welcome to a new episode of Jester Radio. Today on the podcast is my man Deen Boomgard. I don't even, would it be co-founder of Boom Fitness? Or the app at least?
Yeah, the app at least. Yeah, definitely. So
you obviously, want to introduce yourself, working at Gold's Gym.
So originally, I started my own company. It was called Bold Strength, right?
Yes, that's still your name on Instagram.
Still my name on Instagram. I still have the company. It's just now I've obviously ventured into something different. Still have the personal training and the online stuff for myself, but obviously, my brother and I work in the same industry in the same place as well. So we've decided to partner up, try and obviously get better hours, because personal training is it's a long game. And you only have a certain amount of hours in a day that you want to get a certain amount of people in as well. So
and I think that's obviously the biggest limitation in terms of, one-on-one or group training sessions is you've got 8-10 hours, and then you're stretching yourself very thin.
That's true.
Trying to see as many people as you can. So obviously you're trying to, with your new app that you guys have brought out with, I think is awesome. And that also must have been a lengthy process trying to get everything sorted that side.
Definitely.
So, obviously, let's start off with Deen in school.
Fair.
Because you've come a long way in your health journey. You've come a long way in just health, nutrition, training, and everything.
Yeah.
Background in terms of, obviously you're very athletic. You're into sports.
Definitely.
What's your background in terms of fitness?
So obviously at a young age, Dad got us involved in everything, whether it be cricket, rugby, soccer, mostly football. From a young age, obviously, we support Manchester United. And my dad obviously got us into watching football at quite a young age as well. So when I was 5, I started playing for the under-7s at Florida Albion, which was used to be quite a good club back in the day. Now I haven't even seen what it is like now. But yeah, got involved in that. Got involved in cricket at a young age as well. And then rugby at a later stage, obviously when we got to grade 7, when they started introducing, obviously when I moved schools to St. David's, started introducing rugby at younger age groups. And then obviously I got involved in that and then obviously transitioned into high school. Kind of followed the same paths, cricket, rugby, soccer. Tried water polo for a bit as well. That was interesting. But yeah, I've done everything, tennis, everything. And yeah, right now I'm also trying to get into powerlifting at the moment, which is something different, another goal to work towards. Yeah.
So you have had quite a big transformation in terms of weight loss. Was it when you were younger? Was it not what, obviously, but no one really watches what they eat when they're younger.
Yeah.
But did you have, an unhealthy eating habit that you had to obviously rectify going forward to make that transformation? And
definitely,
also, how much weight did you lose?
So from when I was young, I think my dad was my biggest role model, right? Whatever he ate, I wanted to eat, which kind of made it a lot very hard for me to lose weight at a young age. Number one. Also, I had asthma at a young age as well, so I was injected with cortisone the whole time, and obviously that kind of brings your weight up quite a lot. And I didn't necessarily have any habits. I didn't have any help with that regard either. It was kind of sandwiches in the day with polony, butter, everything on it for lunch. And then at dinner time, it's kind of here's a pie with some chips.
That also, that is reflectant on the time because back then,
carbs were a big thing.
Yeah, carbs were a big thing. No one really had education on nutrition. Even our parents, when they were raising us,
exactly,
they didn't really know the same way parents do today. The benefits of certain foods, and then it was kind of, this is easy and quick to make for our kids. Let's give them that.
Yeah. So I think the first time I actually was okay, it's time to start getting serious about losing weight was after, they called it first year spread, right? Where you go to varsity, you just end up drinking, meeting new people, going out all the time. I think I picked up about at least about 12 kgs easily. I think I started off in matric when I was 65 kgs. Got to varsity, went straight to 80, 82 around there. That was a wake up call for me. I was listen, I've got to do that. And also I was studying sports science at the time. So to be at the end of the day, you can be in sport, you can be whatever weights or whatever, but for you to be taken seriously, you have to have a certain look unfortunately. Like, that's just how it is. Even if you are a strength and conditioning coach, if you have the most amount of knowledge, whatever, nobody's going to take you seriously until you actually do what you say you're going to do, you know? So after first year, I lost a bit of weight. I wouldn't say I lost the most amount of weight. I just got like to a point where I was leaner than I was in high school. And then 21st season came around and I just also just lost it there. So I've fluctuated a lot. I'd say the best time when I lost the most amount of weight was my first year of working at Gold's Gym. I'd obviously seen that trainers looked great at Gold's Gym. And obviously, you know, when you look great, people want to look like you, essentially. So I got more clients involved with me, and then I just followed suit. I think my first client didn't necessarily want to look a certain way. She just wanted to be strong. So she trusted me because of my degree, I guess. And then from there, I just kind of was like, I'm tired of being known as like a trainer, but not like look a trainer, if you know what I mean. So I lost about, also, I think I weighed 68 in the end. That was like the leanest I've ever been. And I was at about around 16% body fat at the time. And then a few months later, it dropped down to 13. So that was like the lowest I've ever been, is 13% body fat. Right now, it's a little bit different. Obviously, a holiday came around. And obviously with powerlifting, there isn't necessarily much of an aesthetic goal right now. But obviously, I want to change that like narrative, you know. I want to be a powerlifter, but also look like someone who's, you know, lean and aesthetic. That's the main goal, yeah.
That first initial, you know, year working at Gold's Gym, was it a mental shift in terms of, you know, I need to be healthier, or was it maybe more of a business decision in terms of the better I look, the more clients I'll be able to attract? I
think it was a bit of both, to be honest. I realized that as soon as I started losing weight, a lot more people wanted to get involved, right? So there's a kind of a feeder system at Gold's Gym, you know. They'll recommend trainers to, based off people, what they want. You know, like if someone wants to get stronger, they'll come to me because I have the knowledge on how to get stronger without getting hurt. That's the one thing that a lot of people come to trainers for, is they've gotten hurt in the past from other trainers. And now they want to get stronger, but they've got certain injuries, right? So number one is technique and all that stuff. But I think from Instagram was where I got most of my clients. I just started losing weight, started posting my journey, that type of stuff. Obviously, good and bad. I think if you can kind of be transparent as much as possible, people can relate to you in certain ways. And then from there, once I lost a certain amount of weight, I got a lot more requests, sometimes even every day. Sometimes I didn't have any space for clients. And like, obviously, everyone wants certain times because they have their days, you know. Some people are lawyers, some people are accountants, all that stuff. So in the mornings is when it's like so busy. I had like, at a point, I was juggling 20 clients.
Sure.
And like trying to work 20 clients in a 12-hour, 16-hour day, it's impossible, you know? So yeah, that's when I started like gaining more clients, is when I started losing a lot more weight. That was like, for me, what happened, yeah.
And then in terms of, you know, working those long hours, you've lost all this weight, you're starting to look better, you're putting more focus on your training, but now you're putting focus on other people, you're putting focus on them. You start to stop looking after yourself as well, because you're so busy and because you're so focused on other people.
Yeah.
That obviously happened as well.
That did happen as well. I think a lot of people assume that because you work in a gym, you have time to train all the time. That's definitely not the case. Like, sometimes you start at 5 a.m. and you'll end at about like 2 or 3 p.m. You haven't had much sleep the previous night before. So your motivation to train is very low, number one. Obviously, motivation is like, it's not necessarily if you were to train every time you're motivated, you probably wouldn't train, right? So like the discipline you had to have, or I had to have, to try and then get a session in was like, I was tired most of the time. Let me say that. I still am. I'm not gonna lie. So it's just, I try to find the balance. I'm still trying to find the balance. It's definitely, it's very hard to, especially like when you speak to people, there's actually a lot of energy that you're given when you're speaking to people, showing them certain exercises. Like let's say you're doing a deadlift and someone's doing it incorrectly. You have to then go and show the person, if they're visual learners or, you know, other types of learners, you'll have to go and show them what a proper deadlift is like, you know.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I found is you can be so tired that your session is so shit at the end of the day. Like you got 3 exercises in and you're like, you know what, I'm actually done.
And also, it's not just the physical toll; it's also the mental toll. In terms of some people come with problems, some people come with spouse problems, and then you also there, kind of acting as a psychologist while they're training, and that's also taxing on energy in general.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, everyone has issues, right? So if you see 14 people with 14 different issues, you have to try and give out advice. That mentally like drains you, but also if you're mentally drained, your body will inevitably be drained as well. I've found that to be true, especially in the gym environment. Yeah.
So what have you done, obviously now with this app? Is that what you've been kind of going into to combat, you know, the hours in a day, the limited hours, and what you can offer people in terms of one-on-one and stuff?
Look, I love training people. I love speaking to people, being with people one-on-one is like, it's I don't know, it's nice for me, you know. Yeah. I love speaking. I love being bubbly around people, that type of thing. But like I said, again, you only have a certain amount of hours in a day. And with that being said, you can only make a certain amount of money in a day as well, right? If you go to, let's say you charge 2,000 Rand a session for an hour as a personal trainer, people are going to be like, what the fuck? No, I'm going to someone else, right? So you have to find that balance now on how much you should charge people as well, right? Whereas online, you can say there's a certain fee, help 20 people in 1 hour versus one person for that same fee. That's why the online space is kind of where everyone's going, right? I've kind of found that it might be a little bit saturated, but if you don't do it, you're losing out quite a bit. Yeah.
And in terms of social media and being in a gym and being able to, you know, post a lot of content in a gym, that's obviously helped you attract a lot of clients, and it's helped you see, you know, obviously you knew before you started at Gold's Gym about the possibility of being more online. Yeah. But, you know, now obviously you see it even more so by being there all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's something that I think you also, and social media, I don't think trainers, a lot of maybe Virgin Active trainers overlook the power of social media and the power of, you know, promoting yourself.
You'd be surprised, actually.
Creating a personal brand. And it's silly because you can reach so many people digitally.
Exactly.
And then you can take them online and coach them online. So is that something you would want to do full time? Would you still want to see people one-on-one because obviously you enjoy that interaction? Yeah.
So I would definitely, if that was a possibility, right, I could pick the clients that I want to see one-on-one basis, right? That for me will always be my bread and butter, is seeing that, seeing those people, right? But the online space will definitely help in terms of, let's say you want to go on holiday with you want to surprise your girlfriend with a holiday to a certain place. Now you would have to then tell your clients, listen, I'm leaving, not make money in those 2 or 3 days, versus you online, you can work remotely and help people while you are wherever you are in the world. That's the power of obviously social media and also working in a digital space.
Yeah. And now with this app, you know, I assume that's been a difficult process, a lot of back and forth between you and developers. Has there been a challenging process? Obviously now it's launched, but was it a challenging process?
So I was very hesitant when it came to putting it out before we perfected the app, you know. But I think a lot of people who run apps were like, listen, just get it out there. You can obviously make changes along the way. Because if you don't get your brand and your whole concept out there, then nobody knows what's happening. You can't make any money. There's no revenue coming through, nothing. So you might as well just do it, see if people enjoy it, get feedback from them, and then try and make it better each year, each month, each day, you know?
What is the most challenging thing about, you know, creating the app? Because I assume obviously you've got videos of you guys doing the exercises. Was that just a lot of energy that went into it? What is
for sure. So that part was hard, but I think you know my brother and I, we have different opinions on everything, right? So if you have 2 people working who are also kind of the same people, you know, it's very hard to actually make a decision. So I said this versus he said that. That was actually the hardest part, was trying to decide what we wanted based off what I like versus what he likes, you know. The actual exercises and stuff was fine. I mean, we we're relatively fit, you know, so we
So it
can.
wasn't like, a week of
No.
like 4 hours every day getting all these, because I mean, there's so many exercises.
Exactly. I think they themselves, so the developers that we use have like 4,000 exercises on there themselves. And then for our programs that we make, we obviously have to make our own videos for that. So that was actually wasn't necessarily that bad because we make videos all the time. So now it's just making like 30-second clips,
I guess
20-second
also,
clips.
today we're going to go train chest. Let's just film the workouts
Exactly.
and then submit those videos.
That's literally what we did. So we were like, let's train chest. Let's focus on one angle here, so that if someone sees it on the app, they can see exactly what to do, the form, everything, sets and reps, all that stuff. Yeah.
So that was also obviously a big learning curve, is working with a brother.
Oh yeah.
And in
for
terms
sure.
of business decisions.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
what kind of lessons did you learn from that?
I learned that sometimes you are wrong. You know, you have to listen in order to get the best decision. You got to listen, right? Same with my brother. I mean, look, the amount that he actually takes in, I don't know, but at the end of the day, like I realized, listening is a lot better than responding, right? Versus you hear whatever's coming in, don't listen to respond. Listen to actually take in, rationalize, and then respond. Because I found that's the biggest lesson that I've learned. Like starting in 2023 specifically, that's one thing I said to myself. Listen, if you just listening to respond, you're never gonna like come to a decision ever.
Yeah, because you're thinking about your response.
Exactly.
You're not actually thinking about
Exactly.
what
You're not understanding what he's trying to say or what any person is trying to say, because you're just wanting to respond. I've realized that I'm a very hard-headed person, right? So if someone starts an argument with me, I'll definitely try and argue back. But I've realized there's no point in trying to argue if you don't understand what you're arguing about, you know? So you just got to listen. And then once you've actually learned and like decided what you think about it, then you can respond. That's important.
Yeah, I think it's, sometimes looking at yourself and be like, is this me disagreeing with this person, or is it just my ego that needs to
Exactly.
be right?
Yeah. Egos.
And in business, I think a lot of, you need to be self-assured. You need to know where you stand. You need to be confident in yourself. But I think a lot of great business people actually don't have an ego.
Yeah.
They don't do certain things and make decisions based on trying to make themselves look good.
Fair.
They maybe can be more patient, make themselves, or, let's say Assad thinks he must do this a certain way. You say, no, you must do it a different way. And then you say, actually, no, let me just listen to Assad. Let's do it like this. And then in the long term, we're both going to benefit.
Yeah.
So I think it's also, just kind of lowering yourself, lowering your ego.
Definitely.
For the greater good.
Otherwise, you're never going to make a decision. That's what I've realized, So that was probably the biggest lesson I've learned in 2022 and moving into 2023. That's something that I'm going to be implementing with every person. No matter who you are, I'm going to listen rather than trying to respond.
And now dealing with these clients in person, I'm sure obviously it is taxing emotionally, but how is it managing their expectations emotionally and managing what they're capable of? Because so many coaches will sell a client the world, their dreams, just because they obviously want them as a client, to secure them as a client.
For sure.
But obviously you need to be realistic with your clients.
Exactly. So in initial consultation, when I sit down with the client and I'm like, hey, what are your goals? What do you want to look like? That type of thing. Look, the first thing is obviously aesthetics, always, right? But their time frames is usually unrealistic. So they want to 2 weeks, literally. They're like, I want to lose 20 kgs in 2 weeks. And you're like, okay, it's unrealistic. You're not going to do that. Let's give yourself 2 or 3 months. Even then, you probably won't lose that 20 kgs, right? But you'll see other changes that might influence how you go about getting to your goal, right? The first thing I say to a client is set yourself smaller goals, right? You have the big goal. Cool. You want to lose 20 kgs. Set yourself a smaller goal and a time frame. I think a time frame is important for goals, right? Because if you say, let's say you have a vague goal being, I want to make R1 million. Let's say that, right? If you don't set yourself a time frame, you're going to live 20, 30 years down the line and you still haven't made R1 million, but you're like, no, it's still my goal. I'm still getting there. But you don't know actually where you've come, right? How far you actually are to getting there. If you don't make those smaller goals and set yourself time frames for those smaller goals. That's what I've realized. Yeah.
I think it's also when dealing with the body, and because I mean everyone's relationship with food is different. We all need food to survive.
Yeah.
It's impossible not. There's been people that have quit smoking and said it was more difficult to eat healthier than it was to quit smoking. And
Fair.
because our entire lives we've grown up with food, maybe grown up with unhealthy habits or grown up with sugar addictions, and smoking maybe came late in life. So that's maybe why, because like let's say I've had 27 years of eating food.
Yeah.
If I started smoking 2 years ago, it's only 2 years of addiction, whereas food is ingrained in our lives. Food's ingrained in everything.
Exactly.
And I think that's the biggest thing also, is helping people with nutrition, because obviously working with them in the gym, you can monitor them one-on-one how they're training, and you can see that.
Exactly.
Whereas when they get home, you've set out a nutrition plan for them, then they come back, in 2 weeks, you try to look at the progress, you're like, well, I can see you haven't been eating properly.
Exactly. Yeah. Actually, the other day there was a client. So I take on clients who either lack experience in the gym or have had issues in the gym with regards to their mechanics, right? So let's say you've done a squat before, you slipped a disc, right? I take on those clients specifically because I have the knowledge to guide them into better technique, number one, to be safer, strengthen their core so that they never ever get an injury like that again. The other day, there was a lady who I trained, and she had sciatica. I don't know if you know what that is. So
explain for the audience. And for
so
me.
it's when there's a nerve that runs from the lower part of your back all the way down into your foot, right? And there's a muscle that, if it's inflamed, your piriformis, which is in your glute area.
Bro, I promise you, I've got that.
I
promise you.
So
I was building one of these cabinets that you guys can see there, and just from bending over, my lower back is in such pain. So I was doing legs the other day. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's chill.
And I was doing like Bulgarian squats, obviously working a lot of glutes. Then I went and did straight leg deadlifts. Then I was doing squats. And then when I was at the bottom of the squat, my lower back just like almost seized, and then I couldn't get the weight up. My lower back was so sore I couldn't bend over to pick up water bottle or anything. And then I started stretching my glutes, and it helped a little bit. And I could feel that it was the tension. Obviously, it might not be as extreme as what she had.
Exactly.
But it's got elevated the more I obviously stretched out my glutes. It's just interesting that you say that.
Yeah, I mean, if you understand certain mechanisms of injury, you can then obviously work around the injury. Number one, number two, you can also fix the injury. So if you have sciatica, there's a muscle called the piriformis that is pressing onto a nerve, which then is irritated and then can lead to serious pain. So
that's in your glute.
That's in your glute. And when you sit down, bend, anything like that, it can actually be extremely painful. So one thing I did was, so we literally on, I think it was last week Friday, we did a mobility session. So I also take clients for mobility because some clients are stiff, very, very stiff. Took her through that, and on the Sunday, actually the Monday morning at 2:00 in the morning, the session was on the Friday. The Monday morning at 2:00 in the morning, she messages me to say, there's something wrong to her. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. Like, you spend an hour with me, and then the rest of the weekend you go and do whatever. But it's my fault that I did this, And I know for a fact that I didn't do anything to hurt her at all. We literally went through a mobility session. Now it can be painful, mobility, because you're going through certain ranges that you're not used to, right? But it's not gonna exacerbate your issues even further. It's actually gonna make it better. So I was very confused at that time. But then, like I said, I took a step back. I didn't want to argue. I listened. And then that Monday, she opened up, and I was like, she said no. She went and did things. She was busy. She didn't realize that she was so busy, and then it started flaring up. Now, again, it's not necessarily the trainer's fault that happened. Those things do flare up a lot, actually, because it's basically your glutes isn't necessarily that strong, right? So that muscle is under tension the whole time in order to keep your pelvis stable. So walking obviously incorporates your pelvis a lot. And you need your glutes in order to either keep you upright or to keep your legs from falling off, essentially, right? If you don't have glute strength, you probably put a lot more pressure on your knees, on your ankles, that type of stuff. So that's something that I've realized is important, is your hips, right? If you can get your glutes and your hips to be strong, promise you'll never get an injury ever again in your life.
And especially lower back injuries come
Exactly.
largely from, glute inactivity or weakness.
Yeah. I mean, I also train trainers who are who've had injuries in the past and don't know how to fix it, right? I had an instructor who had back injury. She was a CrossFitter. She's fit. She's very fit. She just has a lot of pain. Came to me, strengthened all her areas, and then when she was doing all her activities, she was perfect. There's nothing wrong with her. That's my main goal for any client is pain-free movement always.
And I think you say like she was an instructor. If you look at bodybuilders might have these big legs, straight to glutes, but their glutes actually aren't strong.
Aren't that strong, exactly. Exactly.
If they've got lower back issues, it could be because their glutes aren't, worked enough, or their core isn't strong. Because I mean, as bodybuilders, you do a little bit of abs here and there, but when you shred it doesn't really matter how much abs you're training. And then obviously you get those injuries. But people look at a bodyboarder and they might say that's the peak of performance.
Yeah.
When actually it's probably the opposite of what's true.
Exactly. So I mean, look, I don't have anything against bodybuilders, right? I just find that if so let's say you picturing yourself as like the epitome of health, right? As a bodybuilder. I think you should definitely have a disclaimer to say this is not that healthy, right? Because if you don't, a lot of people are going to be, number one, depressed because they can't get to that certain physique, right? Without starving themselves.
And getting depressed in the process anyway.
Exactly. So I always tell clients, because clients always come to me and they're like, I want to look like this. And they show me an Instagram model. And I'm like, okay, let's just be a little bit careful here, because let's look at her training age. Let's look at what she does. Let's look at where she's at in her life. Now, some clients who are 45 want to look like a 22-year-old. And you're like, listen, again, you have to come into that. You have to put you have to be, depending on who the trainer is, you have to be like, what's the word? Logical, right? You have to be like, listen, you're not going to get there. Or rather, truthful. Yeah. Because as a trainer, you can be like,
it's tough love.
Yeah. You can be like, as a trainer, you can be like, yeah, sure, you can get there, for sure. But as someone who actually cares about you, if a trainer cares about you, they'll be like, listen, that's probably impossible, right? Because some people have superior genetics, right? But again, obviously they worked fucking hard to look the way they look right now. Someone who's 45, who's never trained in their life, comes to you and wants to look like that. You're going to be like, look, you probably passed your prime, but we can get you somewhere in and around what your prime is like. I think that's the most important part, is that you have to differentiate Instagram models, whoever, from the actual client. You have to be like, listen, this is what you look like from childhood. This is what you look like in your teens, your 30s, now your 40s. So in that frame, you can see if someone's going to look genetically like...
You can tell, let's say, even if someone hasn't trained that often.
Yes.
You can see good genetics versus bad genetics. So you can see, especially, working with people daily, you can understand people's limitations just by looking at them, even if they haven't trained or they are training.
Exactly. Like, I mean, some people love running, some people don't. If you're trying to get into running as someone who doesn't like running, you probably won't get into it anytime soon. And vice versa. If you love running, but you don't like strength training, you're not going to get into it anytime soon. But you know that there are benefits for both. That's something that I've learned. You have to tell clients, like, listen, you're strong, cool. How's your cardiovascular fitness? Because again, so one thing that I always tell clients as well is, I'm actually not a personal trainer, right? I'm a strength and conditioning coach. So my goal is to get you holistically strong, fit, and aesthetically good looking, right? That whole picture. If you can work with me and listen to me as much as possible, you'll get there quicker. That's what I always tell clients. I'm not a personal trainer. I'm not going to tell you lies. I'm realistic. I'm a strength and conditioning coach, right? It took me 3 years to get your undergrad, and then you go and you do a performance sport. So technically I should be working with teams, right? Elite athletes and teams. But obviously in that time it was COVID. I didn't have connections to go into elite teams. I came back to Joburg from Cape Town. I studied in Cape Town. And the first thing I did was got into a small gym, sent them my CV, said I was an S&C coach. I learned a lot there. from a former. He was a former Bafana like S&C coach and bio, right? He was a bio and S&C coach at once. He taught me a lot of things, right? Moved into the Goals Gym, and I found that a lot of people, especially trainers, don't know how to like differentiate between strength and aesthetics. If someone comes to you wanting to look good, you're probably not going to put them under like a 230 kg squat, right? Your main goal there would be volume of training. Versus if someone wants to get strong, then you're trying to move up to that strength goal. That's what I've realized. Some trainers can't differentiate.
And now, your own personal strength journey, because, last year that you went and did the half marathon, eh?
Yes.
So you went through that process. Also talk about that process a little bit, but now, in the more strength training part of your fitness journey, so obviously, you lost that weight when you started working at Golds.
Yeah.
What was your, goal in terms of your physique or your strength, in that first year? And then, what made you decide to get into, that little bit of running that you did, and then now the strength phase?
So the reason why I got into the whole thing of losing weight was purely aesthetic reasons, right? Everyone around me looked good. So in order for me to be taken seriously, I had to look similar in a way, right? So that was the first year. I had a mentor at Goals Gym as well. He helped me through a lot of my own technique that I could help with my clients as well. He challenged me to run like a 21, and I kept putting it off because I don't know why, but I loved sport, hated running for some reason, and I'm not gonna lie, it only became like a realistic goal last year when I met my girlfriend. She was someone who ran quite often and did races quite often. So she wanted to do the Soweto Marathon, and I was like, okay, well, I'll do it with you. And then from there, I actually changed my training completely from bodybuilding into running specific training, right? Obviously, there's some like layover and some transference between the two, but running training is very different to traditional body training, like bodybuilding training, So yeah, it was different. It was hard, but I mean, I did it at the end. So that was one thing I said I was going to do, and I did it. That was important. I followed through.
And I think that's it, is setting those goals, regardless of what they are, regardless of how small or how big anyone's goals are, just following through and sticking to it. And even if along the way, if it slightly changes, it's not the end of the world, but it's having that goal and, saying, I want to run 21 Ks at Soweto.
Yeah.
That's a definite goal. There's no, I want to run 21 Ks and it takes you 5 years to get there.
Exactly.
There was an end date. Exactly.
There was a time frame to get to. So I think I gave myself 2 months to run 21. Now, I've always been fit, right? Like doing let's say you could do a 30-minute HIIT session. I would push through. I'd be probably the fittest person there, actually, if I think about it. And at Goals Gym, they have different classes, right? There's a class called the Dungeon, right? And that class is quite hectic. And in the end of the class, you have burpees. For some reason, I love burpees now. For some reason, like there was a class where they said do 50 burpees at the end of it after a whole like HIIT thing for an hour. And I was like, bring it on. Everyone else was complaining, and I was like, I'll do it. Did it in 2 minutes, 50 burpees.
Yeah,
like that's fucking hard.
No, that's good.
It's hard. So I've always been fit, but running is a different kind of fitness, right? Because sometimes it can be boring, especially if when you're trying to build up your base, when you're trying to run. Like you're not going to be running your PB every single race. I mean, every single time you go and run. I had to learn that, number one. Number two, I realized I'm actually very, very stiff as a person. So I have to sort that out. I worked with the bio as well, right? She helped me get my hip flexors to start working instead of me pulling my legs through with my back, right? Because I don't know if you felt whenever you go for a run, you might feel stiffness in your back and your calf specifically. Right, so I worked on shin strength, calf strength, hip flexor strength, which nobody actually does. Right, shins. Have you ever heard of someone putting a shin exercise in their program? No one does that. Even hip flexors.
Maybe a runner specific program, but not any people in the gym. Almost.
No one's going to do that. But let's say you are a bodybuilder and someone says, let's go for a 5K run. Your calves are going to be burning at the end of that. Like, not just your calves, your shins specifically. Your calves will take most of the brunt because your shins are so weak. That's what I've also realized working with clients, is that when they want to go for runs, what do you actually do? What is your warm-up? What is your cool-down? What do you do in terms of strength training, right? So I've actually now got a few runners that I train, and the one thing that they've mentioned is after the run, they don't feel as like sore anymore because you're working the right muscles based off the demands of the actual sport. That again is the difference between a strength and conditioning program versus a normal program. That's the difference. So I learned that myself and applied it into my clients' training.
And now, going in your strength conditioning, the strength training and powerlifting and all of that?
Yeah, so I got it. I'm going to powerlifting now because for some reason, actually no, for a good reason, I've always been in a deficit, right? I've never ever in my life gone to a surplus in terms of nutrition, right? And I've never tried to get bigger in terms of building muscle. I've always wanted to lose weight, right? So I figured, like, there's no point in, I've done it now for 24 years. I might as well try build some muscle and potentially then lose a lot more fat a lot quicker after I've built more muscle. I think a lot of people can benefit from getting more muscle, right? One thing you don't also want to think about is when it comes to strength is you're not going to get bigger if your goal is strength, right? It's two different things. Building muscle and getting stronger is two different things. There can be a bit of transference. If you get more muscle, there will be more muscle fibers to obviously generate more force, right? But if your goal is strength, you're not necessarily trying to get bigger. You're just trying to, obviously, strength is basically your body's ability to work with all its muscles at once, right? Can you initiate enough muscle fibers to lift a implement from point A to point B? That's literally strength, right? So if you can get that right, then it's easier to go from strength into hypertrophy, and then you can shred down a little bit better. That's my thinking for this powerlifting. If it becomes like a serious thing, like I'm competing on the 19th of March. There's a grassroots competition. I've never ever competed for powerlifting, so I'm competing on the 19th. I want to see what I can do. I've got a coach as well, because again, you as a strength and conditioning coach, you can program it for yourself, but are you gonna be too hard on yourself? Are you gonna program it specific to you? So I put that in someone else's hands, basically, so that I can keep myself accountable and they can keep me accountable as well. So yeah, we'll see. That the main goal is to try and be competitive, because I think for 2 or 3 years, it was just the goal of trying to lose weight. It's not necessarily competitive, So I wanted to do something that's competitive, challenge myself, set a goal, time frame, and try and see what I can do. Yeah.
Well, it's good that you have that goal in mind and you have that, definitive date. And bro, good luck for that. I'm really excited to see that.
Shot, yeah.
And yeah, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to call it now because I need to get to another meeting.
No stress.
But at the end of the day, bro, it's been a pleasure and it's been enjoyable watching your journey. Obviously meeting you through Assad and then following your life on social media and seeing everything you've gone through. It's been awesome. And hopefully, I know that people will find value from having you, and yeah, hopefully they did find value.
Yeah, hopefully.
And also if they do want to, be coached by you or whatever, they just hit you up on Instagram.
Yeah, hit me up on Instagram. Yeah. And obviously if you can't come to the gym, obviously we can work online as well. That's, again, we'll be speaking about that, but definitely will help you there. Yeah.
Epic. Well, guys, thanks for watching.